And now we move on to Kevin Burke, General Manager, International of BCSG, a leading provider of digital tools for businesses. He works with financial institutions around the world to design and roll out differentiating propositions that help small business owners run their business more effectively. Prior to joining BCSG, Kevin served as COO at Smart.com, where he spearheaded the successful launch of Smarter Business, builder to the Royal Bank of Scotland small businesses customer base. Kevin has more than 15 years of experience at technology companies, ranging from a senior level role at Yahoo to co-founder of a small business. Using smart data to engage small business owners, that's his topic.
Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for joining today's session. I wanted to talk with you today a little bit about some topics that you've heard a lot about today. There's been a lot of discussions around digitization, around use of big data, and I'm going to talk with you today about some of the experiences that we at BCSG have had in working with banks, who many consider to be the laggards or the dinosaurs of adopting to digitization or big data, using that, how banks have used these things to engage with their small business customers more effectively. So let me first by just provide a little bit of context about who BCSG is and what we do. So BCSG is headquartered in London. We have been around since about 2007, and we work with leading financial institutions around the world to help them build and enhance their propositions for small business owners. So small business is an area of the bank that typically falls somewhere between retail banking and corporate banking, and there's some standard products that banks offer in small business, but really what banks need to do and what we help banks do is create propositions that address the needs of small business owner beyond financial services. So non-financial services, digital solutions that help banks run their business better. So we provide a platform, as you can see in the middle, that it sits in between we sit effectively in between banks, who on one hand have their customers and their financial products, and then on the bottom is leading best-of-breed third parties that provide digital tools for small businesses to run their business better. So a lot of those happen to be fintechs, so we have a platform that aggregates fintechs and allows banks to work with fintechs and other leading providers to help create their propositions. We have a range of services that cover the deployment and execution of these value-added services that we help banks work with. So I'm going to start by talking a little bit about some trends that we see in the marketplace and some of the big issues that we work with when we're working with banks to address. One of the key issues, there's a lot of talk that you hear at these conferences and in general in the press about how banks are being disrupted by fintechs, and that different fintechs are coming in and taking little pieces of the overall value equation of banks and stealing customers from banks and ultimately going to leave banks as utility providers. What we see in general is that there certainly is some disruption and some capturing of market share in some key areas like remittances and some key spot areas, but fundamentally what banks have that the fintechs don't have comes down to large customer bases and a significant amount of trust of customers. So leveraging those two things is really important for banks to continue to keep that relevance. But what is happening in banks is that there is a relentless cost drive to maximize or to address cost pressures, particularly in the small business space, which is where we focus. Historically, banks have been able to serve small businesses with a one-on-one personalized touch through relationship managers and delivery channels that focused on face-to-face. But as we see in this chart here, what's happening is as cost pressures and digitization are basically causing banks to move their delivery channels and their service models to more digital environments through online banking, through mobile channels, and the service levels are not as face-to-face and not as direct as they are, because they just can't support those costs. So the challenge that banks have is, as you move from those sort of high cost to serve but high touch relationship models where your relationship is deep, and then you're moving to these digital models of engagement, how do you ensure that you maintain that relevancy, that depth of relationship in a way that's low cost to serve on an ongoing basis? So what we do is we help them build, in the upper right-hand corner, these digital solutions and tools that offer personalized, contextualized ways of delivering insight, deepening the relationship with customers, but with a lower cost to serve. Another broad trend that we see that banks have to face on a regular basis is that when we ask small business customers what is different about their bank from other banks, the general answer that we get in 75% of the cases is that there's not much of a difference. So small business owners really don't see much of a difference. A bank offers typical banking products. I don't really see what another bank offers, that my bank offers, that's significantly different. And then another thing that we see is when the banks are offering products to small business owners, they typically are taking products that are designed for large corporates and trying to shoehorn them into small business products. So when you look at things like cash management services or tax services, on the right hand of this chart, you see that small business owners generally feel that they're not relevant to them and that they're not directly addressing the needs that they have. So what can banks do to address this challenge and to maintain that relevancy? The first thing that we see is for the banks to really solidly understand what the needs are of small business owners. And we've worked with hundreds of thousands, if not millions, of small business owners through the course of our engagements over the past several years. And broadly, through third-party research and direct contact that we've had, what we see is that small business owners' needs fall into three broad categories. Help me run my business better, help me manage my cash flow, and help me get new customers and grow my business. These are, regardless of the industry that you're in, regardless of the business size that you're in, the things that keep business owners up at night. It's not necessarily how do I get a loan, how do I make sure that my sort of cash management or online banking system or app works. It's these things about the running of the business that are really critical and top of mind to small business owners. So when banks think about describing their proposition or enhancing their proposition, these needs need to be front of mind. And then coming down to the issue around how do you serve and meet these needs in a low cost to serve way that's digital first. This is where we come in and help banks develop propositions. So what we do is the critical thing in developing digital propositions is making it really easy to use, really intuitive. This concept that business owners don't have a lot of time to learn how to do new things. One of the key mantras that we consistently have in developing things is do it for me. So the small business owner wants a digital solution or the bank to do it for them and to help take the time out of the manual tasks and running of business that they have. So that's some context. So let me show you some specific examples so it can bring to life a little bit about the types of things that we've done and how some, what we consider to be leading banks, are using these kind of digital tools to reinvent the way that their service delivery works for small business owners. So Wells Fargo in the US has built a proposition called Wells Fargo Works, which is essentially a area on their website, or it's a digital proposition that helps business owners with content and tools to really run their business more effectively. And we worked with them to create a business plan center. Consistently, what they hear is when you look at traffic, Google searches, traffic to their websites, and discussions with their relationship managers, help with business planning and planning cash flow and needs for the future is always an area that's recurring theme. So we helped them build this business plan center, which has some digital tools, and I want to show you an example of how a digital tool has manifested itself that really leverages big data. So this is a competitive intelligence tool that we've built that has a variety of data sources from various sources in the US that are comprised into this tool and algorithm that allows business owners to get information to benchmark themselves in their performance. So for example, if I am a dentist, and I'm just typing it in right now, and this is in the US, this tool in Boston, Massachusetts, I can type in very easily right here, and then come to this business intelligence tool, which allows me to see how I compare and how my performance compares to businesses like me, so other dentists in Boston. So if I type in that my expectation as I'm starting a business, or my expectation next year is that I expect to get $1 million worth of revenue in my practice, I can see how this projection of the $1 million that I put in compares to other dentists in Boston, other dentists in Massachusetts, other dentists in the US. So I can see how I compare for my local area as well as a broader area. And then I can dig down and see where specifically in Boston on a very local basis, some of the dentists are making more money and the more successful or revenue generating dental practices are. There are a bunch of other stats, and I'm not going to have a lot of time to go through, but there are a bunch of other stats that are really useful for helping small business owners project their performance, but also expect what their costs will be. So I can look up and see what the salary expectations are. So I expect that I will have to pay dental hygienists or staff in general $40,000 a year, and I can see how those salaries compare to other dentists, again, in the local area that I'm in. So you can imagine that the conversation that a small business banker has with a small business owner, where a small business owner is saying, I want to start this business, and I think that I'm going to get this much this year, and I think this is what my expenditure is going to be. It's much, much more powerful if there's a trove of real, actual data to compare to, and it can allow the business owner to make much better decisions. Another example that I want to talk about, which we launched recently, is a partnership with Deutsche Bank. We've done something in Italy and also in Germany. We've just announced very recently the Unternehmer portal, which is available to customers of Deutsche Bank in Germany. Deutsche Bank has pulled together a variety of leading insight tools to allow business owners and help business owners make better decisions. So there's a business planning tool, a benchmarking tool similar to what we just saw with Wells Fargo for Germany, a credit checking tool to allow small business owners to actually assess the credit worthiness of businesses that they're looking to extend credit terms to or might be potential suppliers or customers, and then an export trade portal where businesses can research and find out information about what would be trade tariffs or what are potential conferences or trade shows for specific industries in specific countries. So I can just show you an example, and I may need to log in again, of what this looks like in terms of a conversation between a Deutsche Bank relationship manager and a customer. Historically, general account opening conversations with small businesses, or when a small business would come into a loan, it would be fairly generic conversations about what the expectations were of the business and how what the products that the bank could potentially provide the customer. But when you have this kind of data and this type of resources available to you, it really enriches the conversation and helps deepen the positioning of the bank as a real overall solutions provider and helping the business make better decisions. So if I look at, for example, if I go to Size Up again, I can see that and just again, to pick an example specific to Germany, something that you saw in the US, if I am thinking of opening a restaurant in Hanover, I get a variety of data tools that I can choose. So I can see how I compare to my competitors, who my potential suppliers are, and where my customers, most likely customers are, and where I should potentially focus on advertising. So if I go, again, if I'm that potential restaurant in Hanover, I can see how my projected annual revenues would compare to other businesses in the local area and in the surrounding areas. And there are other benchmarks as well. In addition, another type of example that the business banker can have with the small business owner is around the credit checking tool. So we have built a proposition in conjunction with Burgle here in Germany, which takes some of their credit score information and credit scoring around payment history and likelihood of a business to pay or potentially their financial risk, and made this available to Deutsche Bank customers who subscribe. So a business can, or sitting down with their relationship manager or by themselves, can go in and take a look at if they're looking at potentially doing business with or extending payment terms. They got a big contract and want to know how much credit or how much payment terms they should extend to another business. They can go in and get some really easy to understand metrics so that they can say, okay, the payment indicator and the financial health indicator is 3 out of 6 or 2 out of 3, so I can get a better sense for how risky it potentially is to do business with that company. And likewise, it gives a easy to understand metric in terms of expected or suggested credit limit that you would extend to that company. So again, just pulling together data from various sources to really help small business owners get very easy to understand, very easy decision-making tools to help run their business. So those are just some sort of high-level examples of how those propositions look like and what the end user interface is. We've done a lot of these over the years, and consistently we find that the execution for banks of making these types of propositions work is really the most challenging thing. So there's a lot of examples where banks have put up digital tools, we call it tools in a tab, on their online banking or on their website, where there's a link to tools, but no one ever goes there because no one ever uses it. So the critical part is really embedding the conversations that these tools enable and the discussions around these tools into the existing processes and existing touch points that banks have. So a really great example is an account opening conversation. Almost all banks still these days have to have a face-to-face session to sign paperwork, to do identification, to open up a bank account. And rather than just being a transactional session, by being able to leverage with specific questions that the account opener can have around, I understand these are some key benchmarks for your business. I understand that these are things that you should consider. This is what businesses like you perform like. Are you aware of this in terms of the profitability, in terms of the revenue, in terms of the costs that business have? That can be really, really powerful. And then on an ongoing basis, it's really important that businesses can have the ability to get alerts and communications on an ongoing basis. So coming back to the idea of do it for me, it's not just about asking businesses to change their behavior and log in to an application every day or on a regular basis. But once customers who, by virtue of being a Deutsche Bank or a Wells Fargo customer, have the rights and access to this type of data, the ability to take the data that exists and the information that we know about a particular business and send out relevant, targeted, personalized communications is really powerful. So rather than getting, if I'm a business that is selling industrial machinery to China, for example, I'm never going to be interested in a tool that the bank may want to sell me that accepts credit card payments. But I would be very interested in tools that can help me really understand more about trading with China and understanding with China. So based upon the behavior that a business owner has in terms of what they enter into the system or how they use the system, the bank's communication can be very, very relevant. And of course, this is all subject to privacy policy opt-ins and user consent, but we found that business owners are much more interested in having communication that is relevant and personalized to what they have shown and demonstrated that they're interested in rather than generic communications. And this helps lead that or achieve those initial goals that we identified about maintaining relevancy to the customer and a high touch point and a personalized relationship with the customer and in a low cost way on an ongoing basis. So I think the sort of final thing that I'd like to share with you is some data about the effectiveness of deploying these types of tools and what we've seen. So the bank that we've worked with the longest on this, that has had several years of data to really analyze the impact of these types of things, is Barclays in the UK. And they have done a bunch of studies to really understand what customers' perceptions are about the types of digital tools that were offered, how that helped the customer in terms of running their business, but also how it impacted the customer's perception of the bank in general. And so a couple key data points that we can highlight for you now that we've seen are, very interestingly, we found that the offering of these types of digital tools that address needs beyond just banking and having a meaningful conversation where the business banker can sit down with a small business owner and offer these types of tools is the number one reason, having that work is the number one reason why a business owner would recommend Barclays to someone else. So actually getting that right is a true differentiation factor and is buzzworthy in that the business owner will then go tell people that Barclays has this service and tool that really helps in these types of things. So that's really, really important and led to a bunch of sort of referrals and acquisitions. We also saw that the general satisfaction that customers had with the bank was increased because of the use of the bank positioning itself and actually acting as a broader solutions provider as opposed to just a banking transactions provider is consistently ranks very, very high in terms of NPS scores, et cetera. And then finally, another interesting stat that we saw is that customers who actually use these types of tools, so who on an ongoing basis use digital tools to help make decisions, to help run their business more efficiently, et cetera, are actually more likely to be successful as a business. And we actually saw that they're less likely to go out of business. So there is a correlation and potentially causation between businesses that use these types of tools as the bank really positions itself as, we have a vested interest in wanting businesses to be more successful. We're going to do everything we can as a bank to help our customers be more successful, because the more our customers are successful, the better we are as a bank. That bank has actually some proof to show that by offering these types of things, they can help businesses be more successful. So that's, I think, some closing. It looks like we have a couple minutes. So if anybody has any questions, I'd be more than happy to answer some.
I see two people who have a question right away.
I'm not sure if this is your area of expertise, but the messaging required to acquire customers based on these advantages that you've been talking about, the messaging is very complicated. Do you have any suggestions on effective ways, if we're a completely online company and we're reaching out to customers digitally, what's some effective ways to get this complex messaging across?
Yeah, I mean, it's a great question, and I think that if you're a digital only sort of proposition, it's challenging because we have found that relying on sort of digital as a primary acquisition method for these types of tools is tough. So I think that we have seen that it does need to have a sort of multi-dimensional approach to it. I mean, ultimately the positioning is, we as a bank aren't just about banking, we are a broader solutions provider, and we have these things to help you be more successful and run your business better. And that message can be delivered in a digital environment, but it really needs to be sort of brought alive, and leveraging the existing interaction that a bank has to show those customers is the most effective. So.
Yeah, my question is, you were talking about big data as a requirement for sourcing information and to doing these benchmarks. Could you please elaborate a little bit more on what kind of big data you need, or what kind of data you need, or when it comes into play at another point of time?
Yeah. Again, it depends. So in the examples that I showed you for benchmarking, for example, for Wells Fargo or for Deutsche Bank, it was a variety of government sources from filings of companies about their annual revenues, about Burgle, for example, in Germany has an entire organization that goes through and assesses and analyzes government reportings, that has people calling up to get information to create their credit scores. So typically, these are third parties that have these sort of data sets available. Then getting down to the sort of geolocation data, there's other sources for that. The banks have a tremendous amount of data themselves as well. And it's harder for banks to use that data in a meaningful way, but they're getting there, and they can provide a really rich layer on top of third-party data sources to help their customers.
Lucas, go.
So it's a combination of...
Yeah.
So it's a combination of all types of data that's available in order to run this tool. I'm just thinking about how complex a big data system needs to be in order to use something like that.
I mean, I don't know if there is I can say that there are multiple sources of data that need a layer of intelligence in order to display them in a way that is very easy to understand.
All right, thank you.
Any more questions? Things you'd like to know? Think of your business. I've got a nice transition, actually. Let me think. Yeah, that's a nice transition. Will algorithms put bankers out of business? Who needs people when I just want to have more money from some money?
I mean, it's interesting. I think that there is an arc of sort of different banking types of services. So, and the more complex and large you get in terms of financial transactions, whether that be, a personal mortgage or, for your business doing some sort of, large loan for growth, I think that the more emotional attachment you have to those very large transactions or those large things, the algorithm will not do it. You will need to have some sort of personalized sort of communication. So I think that there's the trust factor that I talked about in the very beginning that banks absolutely have, that just sort of pure machines don't. But on the more basic, transactional, whether it's sending money abroad or doing, some things that don't really have an emotional investment in it, I think that for sure we will start to see more and more automated ways of delivering services.
Thank you very much, Kevin Burke.
Thank you.